All right, we welcome you into the Hometown Sports Huddle, everybody. I'm Dave Walls here on WDBJ 7 Plus. Hope you're having a good Monday afternoon. Got a lot of headlines to talk about today. Normally, I'll be honest with you, Monday is kind of the quiet day of the week for sports, but this has certainly been an adventurous day locally in sports. We've got a lot to talk about. Of course, we've got March Madness. We'll talk a little bit about that, but let's start first with what we know about local basketball, in that we have two big hits to the transfer portal, one from Virginia Tech, one from UVA. First, we haven't really talked since the whole UVA women's coaching incident happened in Amaka Agugwa Hamilton. Let's talk about that for a moment here, because we've been learning bits and pieces from USA Today and a couple other sources. But in case you missed out the news this weekend, Coach Mox, after 4 seasons, was dismissed on Saturday, very abruptly on Saturday afternoon. And we would learn on Sunday via USA Today report that Coach Mox has been under an internal investigation at UVA for what's being called staff mistreatment. We've heard some whispers that several people had either been fired or had quit because of that, and there were some other issues as well. Again, very details here and there we don't really know about. I think the interesting part that we read about from USA Today was that 4 people had all been quoted in that had knowledge of the investigation, and one of them was an NCAA current head women's basketball coach. And of course, now you want to know, who's that coach? What do we know? Well, again, we don't know anything. I think one thing that is interesting about it is Saturday, during the practice day for the women's championship game, Dawn Staley, who of course has very strong ties to the Cavaliers women's program after being an All-American there in the late 80s and early 90s, said she had reached out to both athletic director Carla Williams and also to Coach Mox, and she had said, hey, I know what you know. Coach Williams said, we'll talk. So if you take everything for face value, Dawn Staley says she didn't really know much. So that will be interesting to see, not only what becomes of that investigation, if anything is ever made public, but furthermore, now who's going to step into this role at UVA? Because certainly the job got a little bit more attractive knowing that you can take a team to the Sweet 16. On the flip side, one of your best players, if not your best player completely, and Kimora Johnson, departed or has announced her intent to transfer into the portal today. Johnson, of course, was the do-it-all everything in the big dance. 28, and 25 points in 3 games. In 3 games? Yeah, or 3 or 4 games. But I mean, like, plus 20 points in all those games. I don't have the stats in front of me. That would certainly be helpful. But Kimora Johnson did it all. She averaged about 20 points in the season, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. I mean, again, the glue that kept that team running in the postseason, and now apparently she will depart for her senior year somewhere else. Meanwhile, before we come back to UVA and the coaching situation there, the other transfer that hit over the weekend is Karis Baker of Virginia Tech. That's a big piece as well, because Karis was averaging around 14 points, 7 boards a game. She had a double-double in the Hokies' lone playoff game in the big dance, 21 points, 14 rebounds there. So certainly big losses on both sides. At least some good news for Virginia Tech, as Carly Wenzel said she will be back for the next season. So that is at least a little bit of good news for Megan Duffy. So let's go back to UVA just for a moment. As we mentioned, Coach Mox is out. Remember, it was Tina Thompson, the WNBA legend, who has been the coach before that. But I was reading a few articles about some of the names that are now being maybe tossed around as, all right, who could be coming back to Virginia? I think one of the interesting ones I heard a little bit of buzz on is Corey Close, who of course just won a championship for UCLA on Sunday. And you figure, why would she leave? Well, apparently Corey Close was one of the finalists for the job back when Tina Thompson was eventually hired for the position. Of course, she would go on to UCLA. Now the question is, would she take it now? And I'll be honest with you, I don't know what to think about that, because of course UCLA just won the championship. However, she did it with a pretty much entirely senior-led squad, so her team would look very different. And from what little information I've been able to pull, her buyout for next season isn't too bad. It would be about $750,000, because I know there's some people go, oh, Dawn Staley, bring her back. This is the opportunity. Dawn Staley's contract, I think, is too cost prohibitive in order to bring her back into the fold in Charlottesville, at least at this point in time. From what I remember reading, I did a lot of reading on Sunday while South Carolina was getting blown out in that championship game. Sean Staley, I believe, has 3 years left on her contract, and it equals out to about $16 million over 3 years, but there's a clause. She is free to leave for an NBA or WNBA coaching position, but if she leaves to go to another school, that school has to pay out her remaining 3 years of her contract at this point. So if Virginia wanted to bring Dawn Staley in, they would have to pay South Carolina $16 million, and then you're looking at least $5 million a year for Dawn Staley, and that's asking a lot of any school to fork out that kind of money. So I don't know that we'll see Dawn Staley. Another intriguing option, and I smile as I say it because I don't know that it would happen, but I mean, let's just say Kenny Brooks is out there. You know, he's had some success with Kentucky, and I think his contract is near up, and his buyout is also reasonable. That would certainly be an interesting option to land in Charlottesville. I think we'll just have to wait and see, one, how the investigation plays out, and two, what Virginia's timeline. Certainly, this is around the time, now that the season's over, you really want to start building into those summer programs. So I would expect Virginia to start moving sooner rather than later. All right, as we move on right now, a story we talked about at 6 o'clock tonight, talking about player eligibility. Now, Bree Warren and her attorneys contacted us earlier today and said, we're taking the NCAA to court next week in Montgomery County. And to fill you in a little bit, Bree Warren is a softball player, a graduate senior, and this would have been her final year. She transferred to Virginia Tech after coming from first Texas A&M and South Carolina. In both those cases, she was released from those obligations with those teams because of coaching changes. One of the reasons that players are usually given a clean slate, like, hey, you got a coaching change, you can go do your thing, no problem. Well, at South Carolina, according to the lawsuit and according to the statements we have from Bree Warren and her attorney, her academic advisors at South Carolina gave her tremendously bad advice, not only on her academic career, but also on her playing eligibility, saying she was not eligible to transfer out of South Carolina because of the timetable about where they were on the calendar of the year, and that she would, if she transferred and left, she wouldn't be able to go play at another school. So she sat and waited for another full school year at South Carolina based on that advice and just did classwork and coursework. And then when it came time to go to Blacksburg, Virginia Tech and Bree all thought, well, here we are. She has another year eligibility. And through that process, she's lost all of her eligibility, and the NCAA has denied her on every occasion, and they've exhausted all the administrative options. And I think the interesting thing here was that Bree calls this in the statement that she sent to me today, that this is her last option. If this doesn't happen, her career comes to an end. And this isn't a case of, where I know some people get exhausted by just talking about transfer portals and this and that. This is not a case of a player going to get a big budget payday somewhere else, saying, hey, this team's going to pay me more, or whatever. This is a case of like, hey, a new coach comes in and says, hey, we don't need you on the roster, and suddenly you're gone. So she's released from her obligations and just wants to be able to play one more year, finish out her career, and she's working on a master's degree at the same time. So, I mean, she's got a lot of lofty aspirations that don't have to do with, maybe the reasons we hear about basketball and football players hitting the transfer portal. So that one's going to be next week over in Montgomery County, and that's the one we're definitely going to keep our eyes peeled on here at WDBJ7. Now, another story where, of course, getting back to the basketball, of course, we got March Madness wrapping up tonight. Now, I want to tell you, if you're watching this, you're probably used to, over the years, watching the finals here on WDBJ7. Not tonight. You have to watch it on TBS. I want to make sure everybody knows that the game between UConn and Michigan tonight is on TBS. It tips off at around 8:50 p.m. First thing you got to know is I can't show you highlights at 11. That's because of the NCAA broadcast rules. They have windows of time where you can't show the highlights until after that's completed. It doesn't matter if you're a CBS station or not. So if you're tuning in tonight at 11, you want to say, just show me who won. No, I can't do that. You actually have to watch the game. We're not going to be able to show you highlights until Tuesday. So you want to make sure you watch for that. Now, I will say in my personal bracket at the beginning of March Madness, I did pick Michigan as my winner. The other side, I had Duke. But I mean, I thought Duke was a safe pick, but UConn was in my Elite Eight, so I didn't feel too bad about that. Now, I think the big thing we've got to watch for tonight is just injuries and how they have affected both teams. We've heard about The injuries of Solo Ball. We've heard about Yaxel's injury. I'm botching his name every time I'm on air, so I want to be careful how I say it. But, I know yesterday for UConn, Solo Ball had a boot on his foot, wasn't really able to warm up, do anything like that, and Dan Hurley called him a game-time decision. Meanwhile, we know that Yaxel for Michigan is got a sprain. I think it's MCL, and he is very much taking it very easy, and he's basically a game-time decision. It's not often when you get to this championship level and there's still question marks about who's going to play and who's going to be in the game tonight. I think I have a hard time counting out. I know I picked Michigan. I have a hard time counting out this UConn team because Dan Hurley, I think, is one of the best, if not the best coach in the game. But Dusty May has done a tremendous job. Of course, remember a few years ago, he took, Florida Atlantic all the way to the Final Four until they got beat by that buzzer beater by San Diego State. But did a tremendous job there and now has Michigan primed and loaded. I think they have scored 90 or more points in every game so far in March Madness, and they have certainly looked like the team to beat. So I'll stick with my original pick tonight. I think this one is a close one. This is 5 points or less. Don't hold me to it. Don't run to DraftKings, but I'm saying I think this one is 5 points or less, and I think that's what you got to look at tonight. All right, one more thing tonight before we wrap up the huddle for tonight. We'll have much more on the huddle tomorrow and on Wednesday, but I did want to mention because tomorrow we're doing interviews with the Roanoke Rail Dogs hockey team as they begin their playoff climb. Roanoke had a tremendous season, and they wrapped it up in South. Let's talk about that for just a minute because the Rail Yard Dogs coming into Saturday's regular season finale. First of all, they had a 2-game set at Peoria, who had already clinched the number 1 seed for the postseason. Best team in the league by far. I think they had a 10-point lead over the second-place team. But Roanoke could have finished anywhere from sixth place in the playoffs, so all the way up to second. Now, second place then got clinched up on Friday, so the best Roanoke could do would be on Saturday. Then it would finish from third to sixth. And if you get third, you got home ice advantage in the first round, and you're facing a team which arguably should have a little bit more success over. So things were looking good there. So they go to Peoria. They score 3 unanswered goals on Friday night. They win that one 3-1. But Saturday, I think, was even more impressive, if that's possible, because Saturday, Joe Widmar collects a loose puck that bounces off the referee in the first minute of the game, deposits it, they're up 1-0. Peoria ties it in the second. We go to overtime, and then it's Gustav Mueller who is able to get the overtime winner with 15 seconds left in overtime, and they win that one by a score of 2-1. So they sweep Peoria in Peoria for the first time ever in team history, and by doing so, they clinch the 3 seed in the postseason. So it's going to be Roanoke will go to Birmingham for game 1 on Friday. Then Saturday night, back at the Berglund Center for an 8 p.m. Puck drop. Now, 7 or 8. It's Saturday night. We'll update you if it's on the website. Trust me on that. It's on the website. And then on Sunday, if it goes to a game 3, it's best of 3 series. So if it goes to game 3, Sunday is a 5:05 tip. I keep saying tip off. I keep thinking Final Four. 5:05 puck drop. And I like hockey. I always forget the terms. But 5:05 puck drop. And Roanoke seems to finally be clicking where maybe the middle of the season, early part of the season, they had a couple games slip away that maybe Dan Bremner and company think, we really should have had that one. But now, you take 2 at Peoria at the end of the year when you're supposed to be playing some of your best hockey. Roanoke is starting to put it together, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. All right, one more thing to watch out for tomorrow. Over in Lynchburg, the Hill City Howlers will have their home opener at Lynchburg City Stadium. They will be home. Now, Salem, of course, returns home tomorrow as well as they kick off. Both teams are kicking off 6-game homestands. And coming in slightly different condition, I think Hill City had 2 outstanding games to start the year. They win 2 games from coming from behind. I think game 1, when they were down in Kannapolis, they had to score the winning runs in the 8th inning and then hold it off with great pitching. Game 2 was solid pitching. They won that one, I think, 8-2. And then game 3, oh boy, it all went awry on Saturday night for Hill City. I think they lost that one 19-2. They gave up 12 runs in the first inning, go through 3 pitchers just to get out of the first inning. Absolutely nothing goes right for Hill City in that game. So they come in to Tuesday night 2-1, and I'll be talking with some people at Lynchburg tomorrow. In fact, I'll be on the Huddle tomorrow from Lynchburg, so I hope you'll tune in for that. Meanwhile, Salem, I think the Ridgejacks got a little bit better as the weekend moved along. they won opening night, and then dropped game 2, and then game 3, the starting pitching came up incredibly well. In fact, they carried a no-hitter into the 7th inning, which was tremendous to see. Into the 7th inning, the bullpen I think is still a little bit shaky for Salem. It's early in the year; these young players will find themselves, but we've seen some little bursts of offense here and there. Some more consistent hitting, is coming their way, but it's the bullpen that's kind of had a little bit of trouble, shutting things down in those final innings. They were able to do it on Saturday night, but it was a 5-0 game after 8, and then they give up 3 in the ninth to win at 5-3. So maybe a little bit better performance coming out of the bullpen to come, but certainly both these teams have a lot to like, no matter which side of the market you're on. 2-1 to start the season. All right, that's going to do it tonight for the Hometown Sports Huddle. Austin's on assignment tonight, and he will be back with us hopefully later this week. And Mitch Carr will be in studio tomorrow night as we continue along our week. Again, March Madness comes up tonight, 8:50 p.m. And again, if you're watching it, don't tune to WDBJ. I mean, tune to WDBJ. But if you're looking for the game, it's on TBS tonight, and we look forward to showing you those highlights. Tomorrow we'll have an update for you tonight at 11. All right, that's going to do it for now. I'm Dave Walls. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.